Present. On.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the hope of the brave?
Right shoulder. Up. Ready? Face. Oh, go. Ready? Up. Ready? Face. Right. Face. Forward. Up.
Today we honor our TSA employees who are veterans, all veterans, our Vietnam veterans, and our veterans of many operations prosecuting the global war on terrorism. With this being a ceremony recognizing our veterans, I'd like to walk our veterans down memory lane with a little PT, no rock marching. Just a request to stand and be recognized. For those who served in the Army, please stand. Our sailors, please stand. Our Air Force airmen, please stand. Our Coast Guard sailors, please stand. We honor our veterans, recognizing the sacrifices and contributions uniformed service members have offered to our nation. Many of our veterans came home, and sadly, some of them have not. I ask that you join me for a moment of silence in remembrance of our prisoners of war and those still missing in action. Thank you. History of Veterans Day. World War I, known as the times of the Great War, officially ended when the Treaty of Versailles was signed on June 28, 1919. Allied nations of Germany went into effect on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month For that reason, November 11th, 1918 is generally regarded as the end of the war to end all wars. Our program today recognizes the 100th year anniversary of that history event in 1918. In November 1919, President Wilson proclaimed November 11th as the first commemoration of Armistice Day with the following words: "To us in America, the reflections of Armistice Day will be filled with solemn pride and the heroism of those who died in our country's service, and with gratitude for the victory, both because of the thing from which it has freed us and because of the opportunity it has given America to show her sympathy with peace and justice in the councils of the nations." The original concept for the celebration was for a day observed with parades and public meetings and a brief suspension of business beginning at 11 a.m. Armistice Day was primarily a day set aside to honor veterans of World War I. But in 1954, after World War II had required the greatest mobilization of soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen in the nation's history, after American forces had fought aggression in Korea, and at the urging of veterans service organizations, on June 1st, 1954, November 11th became a day to honor American veterans of all wars, changing from Armistice Day to Veterans Day. Veterans Day continues to be observed on November 11th, regardless of what day of the week in which it falls. The observance of Veterans Day to November 11th not only preserves the historical significance of the date, but helps focus attention on veterans for their patriotism, love of country, and willingness to serve and sacrifice for the common good. At this time, I would like to introduce our TSA Deputy Administrator. Deputy Administrator Patricia Cogswell is the acting Deputy Administrator of the Transportation Security Administration, overseeing the day-to-day operations of TSA and its mission, with particular focus on security of aviation, passengers and cargo, and surface, rail, bus, mass transit, and pipeline transportation security. Prior to joining TSA, Cogswell served in several positions within the Department of Homeland Security, including Assistant Director for Intelligence at the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Acting Assistant Secretary for Policy Integration and Implementation, and Deputy Assistant Secretary for Screening Coordination. Ladies and gentlemen, Deputy Administrator Cogswell.
I first would just like to start and ask everyone to join me in thanking Amber both for her service as a veteran of the U.S. Army and for her service at TSA as one of our explosive detection canine handlers. Thank you for agreeing to serve as our Master of Ceremonies. It is my pleasure to welcome the veterans here today. We honor your service and your sacrifice as one who was with you during your time. I want to just share a brief note of when I first understood what that service, the first time he ever flew on a plane. He was about 5, and he and his mother were flying to Japan to join my grandfather, who was stationed there post-World War II. And I thought about what that meant for a minute. In a time where there were no phone calls, letters could take weeks, nobody came home for a weekend on a plane. And the fact that he probably hadn't seen his father most of his growing up years, because this was their very first real accompanying tour. And that's when I knew this is what military signs up for, what they expect, what we expect of them, and what they are willing to give in honor and service to their country. My grandfather continued to provide those examples and lessons up to and including when we buried him at Arlington National Cemetery about 15 years ago. Military service requires a willingness to undertake incredibly difficult work in challenging conditions, often with little notice. It asks a lot, both from the service member and from their families. Generations of U.S. military service members have accepted this mission. in peacetime, war, or after the attacks of 9/11, Americans from all backgrounds have responded to the call to serve and protect our country, our allies, and our national interests. Every day, in or out of uniform, our veterans embody both the diversity and unity that binds us together as a nation. Recognizing veterans is particularly important here at TSA, as about 12,000 of the TSA employees, or about 19% of our workforce, are currently serving or are former military members. Veterans have brought an invaluable experience, commitment, and perspective to the work we perform. To all of you, thank you for your service here at TSA. TSA is also deeply committed to our veterans community. Beginning with the first honor flight in 2005, TSA has had the privilege of escorting more than 161,000 veterans through our airports as they travel to national memorials that honor their service and their sacrifices. Through TSA Cares, injured or wounded service members and veterans can receive special assistance with security screening processes at airports nationwide, ensuring they are treated with the honor and respect they so richly deserve. I ask that all of you help spread the message of this dedicated resource available to our wounded warriors when they are planning on traveling through our airports. I am honored to be here today to be able to personally express my thanks to everyone who has served in the military. Your personal sacrifice and your enduring commitment to this nation and its ideals is a model for us all to follow. Please join me in a round of applause for our veterans. And now it is my pleasure to introduce you to our featured speaker, Mr. Brian Cahill, our Federal Security Director from Jacksonville, Florida. FSD Cahill served 23 years in the Navy Reserve and the U.S. Marine Corps before retiring with the rank of Lieutenant Commander. TSA is proud that you have chosen to continue your service with us. Thank you.
Got to shuffle some papers here, otherwise I'm going to get lost. Deputy Administrator Cogswell, Executive Assistant Administrators, men and women of the TSA, and guests, good morning. I want to begin today by recognizing all those among us who have been part of the great brotherhood and sisterhood we call the U.S. military. They are our veterans, active duty service members, guardsmen, and reservists. It is your service and sacrifice that has kept our country safe and free. If you are able, please stand to be recognized. A round of applause. Please know I am both thrilled and humbled to be here. I am well aware of the large number of veterans employed by the TSA, so to be the one invited to serve as today's keynote speaker, I could not possibly feel more honored. I was invited because I recently visited the D-Day beaches of Normandy, and I was asked to share some of what I gleaned during my visit, and if possible, draw a comparison between the heroes of D-Day and the important work TSA employees perform each and every day, and similarities do exist. First, however, I want to let all of you know how proud I am to work for the TSA, in large part because I love our mission. When I swear in new officers, I tell them no government agency in the country, or on the planet for that matter, has a mission that is more important than ours. Some, like our military branches, may have a mission that is equally as important as the TSA's, but none has a mission more important. I tell the officers to think about it, just as I am asking you to think about it now. What other agency has a mission that in the event of failure, the consequences will be grave, immediately felt on every quadrant of the globe, and the world economy could be brought to its knees? I argue you will not find one. But there is no question my primary source of pride comes from the dedication and commitment of our frontline workforce. I don't have to tell this audience what a tough job they have. All of our jobs are tough. But the jobs get tougher the closer one gets to the front line, manned by our inspectors, our canine handlers, our explosive specialists, and our officers. Our officers have perhaps the toughest job in government. They start their shifts very early. They stay very late. Sometimes do both. They work weekends and holidays. They are expected to always serve as ambassadors for our agency, the department, and our nation, even in the face of irritable travelers. We are constantly testing them, and failing could mean the loss of their job and the ability to provide for their families. And as insignificant as this may seem, they are on their feet the majority of their workday. Try that sometime. I vividly recall my first customs assignment at Los Angeles International Airport following 3 months of training at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, and at a time when I was in the Marine Corps Reserve and still very physically fit. I will never forget the pain I felt in my feet and legs until months later when I had finally become conditioned to standing 8 to 16 hours a day. If you have never experienced standing for 4, 6, or 8 hours at a time, please give it a try. And remember, our officers do it every day. And let's not forget the longest government shutdown in history, 35 days. Think about all our officers have to endure on a good day, and then pile on they might not get paid. During the shutdown, many of you found yourselves doing what I was doing, and that was serving as our officers' biggest cheerleader, trying to keep them reassured so they would continue coming to work, and of course trying to keep them motivated so they could remain focused on the critical task at hand. That said, if you are being honest with yourself, you were nervous as hell, just as I was, wondering which day would be the day that our officers had finally had enough and decided to, despite their difficult jobs and despite running the risk of missing paychecks, our officers across the nation answered the call and continued to report for duty. I am proud of many things in the TSA, but the manner in which our officers responded during the government shutdown is so far my proudest moment. And the fact is, when you have a workforce that possesses and has demonstrated such a high level of dedication and commitment, especially when the job is as difficult as it is, success in all other areas is relatively easy to achieve. The bottom line is, I could not possibly be more proud to be a member of the world's finest transportation security organization, and I know you are too. Approximately 3 months ago, my wife and I visited France. Of course, we spent a good amount of time in Paris, but the real objective of the trip was for me to finally visit the D-Day beaches. The visit was truly a lifelong dream of mine. Although my family is rich in military history, I did not have a family member participate in the D-Day invasion or in the fighting that followed months thereafter. But as a military veteran and a World War II enthusiast, I have always felt the calling to visit Normandy. Not necessarily as a tourist wanting to visit every beachhead, museum, and monument, but just to be present and in my own special way pay tribute to the Allied forces that landed on France's northern shore 75 years ago, and especially to those who made the ultimate sacrifice that single day. When arriving in the area, the first thing I noticed was how peaceful, beautiful, and serene it is. The D-Day beaches stretched 60 miles from east to west, with Sword on the eastern flank, and Utah the furthest west. Every square mile contains some of the most beautiful countryside, landscape, farmland, and seascapes I have ever seen. My wife and I agreed that if a professional photographer or painter is looking for a panorama as the subject for his or her next work, there is no better place. The irony was extreme. When experiencing such tranquility, it was hard to envision the horrific events that occurred only 7.5 decades earlier. But with so many visible remnants of the brutal fighting that took place, it makes it impossible to forget, nor should we ever do so. For those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. It is with this in mind I have always felt it important to reflect upon anniversaries significant in American history, such as December 7th, 1941, and June 6th, 1944, to name only a couple. I have also felt it important to appropriately recognize holidays and honor those who keep us safe and free, such as Memorial Day and Veterans Day. Because without our military members and our veterans, including those of our allies, there is no telling what our world might look like today. But I know one thing the French will tell you, and that is they would not be speaking French today had it not been for the courage and selfless acts of our veterans. Across the Normandy region, residents in large numbers still proudly display American, Canadian, and British flags. And once a local learns that you're an American, they don't hesitate to enthusiastically thank you for saving their families and their nation from the grasp of evil and tyranny. Needless to say, it is an amazing feeling to be on the receiving end of such sincere gratitude, and it is something I wish every American could experience. Stepping on the D-Day beaches was surreal. It is where I truly felt the presence of those who served there. And in my own way, I was able to pay tribute to each and every one. The feeling that overcame me when standing on the beaches is exactly what I hoped I would feel, and it was the highlight of my trip. It was overcast and drizzly when we were on Omaha Beach, perhaps the good Lord's way of reminding us of the poor weather conditions that delayed the operation an entire day, creating much angst and anxiety for those who were about to go to shore. With that said, what also came to mind standing on the sands of Omaha and Utah beaches was this. No matter which military branch one serves in, and no matter what one's job path or number of years served, the raising of one's hand and the committing of oneself to service in the military comes with very few guarantees, such as where you might be assigned, whether or not you would ever deploy, and in some cases, if you would return home in one piece, or at all. No one joins the military believing they will lose their life during their time of service. The fact is, however, every military member and veteran did, at some point in time, write a blank check payable to the United States of America for an amount of up to and including their life. Although we don't think about it at the time, the simple act of joining the military in and of itself. At the current time, approximately 1.3 million men and women serve in the military's active component. This extremely small number truly puts military service in perspective, and it amplifies the fact that military service is both noble and honorable. Of course, one reason for the very small number is that military service is not for everyone, and those of us who have answered the call should be extremely proud for doing so. Speaking of answering the call, on D-Day alone, 156,000 Allied forces, including 73,000 Americans, landed on Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juneau, and Sword beaches. An additional 23,000 airborne soldiers were dropped inland hours ahead of the beach landings. Nearly 7,000 naval vessels and 12,000 aircraft participated in D-Day, the largest, most complex amphibious operation ever. Total Allied losses on D-Day alone are estimated at 8,500, with airborne losses estimated at 2,500, and 2,000 more losses at Omaha Beach. Despite global conflict looming for years and our nation's first ever peacetime draft being instituted in 1940, 6.3 million Americans voluntarily answered the call and served during World War II. And I guarantee not one of them planned to die during their service. After all, death always happens to the other guy, right? Again, this gives credence to my earlier statement that the simple act of joining the military is a selfless and courageous one. No one knows what the future holds. When drawing comparisons between military service and TSA service, one comparison I have made for years is that in both cases, it is impossible for the government to pay a salary that is commensurate with the services provided. Military veterans clearly understand this. No one joined the military for the pay, or at least I hope they didn't. If they did, they no doubt became terribly disappointed very quickly. Most join the military because they are attracted to the mission of their preferred branch, their desire to serve others, and their desire to be part of something that is more important collectively than its individual parts. I am convinced, and no one can change my mind, that to be successful and satisfied with service with both the military and the TSA, part of one's compensation must be the great feeling experienced when putting one's head on the pillow at night, knowing that you made a difference, knowing you contributed to all things that are good. From the TSA's perspective, this includes knowing all flights reached their destination safely that day. There is no monetary value one can place on this kind of compensation. It is priceless. Another comparison between military and TSA service is this, and I alluded to it earlier. No government agency or private entity on the face of the planet has a mission that is more important than the TSA's. There might be missions equally as important, but none more important. And if any organization has a mission equally as important, it is the United States military. And at no time was the military's mission on finer display than it was on D-Day. With the fate of France, the European continent, and the entire world hanging in the balance, 23,000 airborne troops were dropped inland under the cloak of night, and just a few hours later, waves of fighting men totaling 156,000 landed on 5 beaches with no guarantee of success. Success or failure would be determined only by the fighting spirit of each and every soul, and whether or not they could take the beach and secure the roads necessary for more troops and supplies to continue on towards Paris. Put more simply, whether or not we would ultimately be successful in freeing France from the grip of Nazi Germany all came down to whether or not we were successful on D-Day. Without victory on D-Day, the liberation of France was not possible. The success or failure of D-Day had worldwide implications, and the success or failure of the TSA does too. Please know I would never compare the harrowing experiences of D-Day to anything we are doing at the TSA, but I will most certainly point out the fact that just as world order could not have been restored without success on D-Day, the entire world is at risk if the TSA fails. We all know that if another 9/11 happens, or anything remotely similar to it, in addition to the loss of lives and property, people won't be moving, cargo won't be moving, and the economies of the United States and the entire world will lose billions of dollars. The world will fail. Perhaps not forever, but it will fail. Some FSDs, FAMSACs, and other executives will remember a short story shared by former Administrator Neffinger during a previous leadership summit. I hope I share it now as well as they remember it. In October 2015, only 3 months after Mr. Neffinger became our administrator, he took a trip to Paris to meet with his counterpart. The purpose of the meeting was to share ideas and challenges and discuss transportation security from the global perspective. He had no intention of meeting with anyone higher in the French government on this trip. As his luck would have it, after accomplishing all he set out to achieve, and shortly before his return flight to Washington, his French counterpart informed him that his boss, Mr. Patrick Gandalf, wanted to meet with him before he departed. At this point during Mr. Neffinger's storytelling, he jokingly claimed to be a little nervous because he had been with the TSA only 3 months and he hardly knew what the letters TSA stood for. Despite all this, he honored the request and met with Mr. Gandalf. Then his mood changed from somewhat jovial to serious. With his index finger extended in our direction, Mr. Neffinger said, "Directors, when I met with Mr. Gandalf, he had one message for me and one message only. The message was this: Peter, we in France and the rest of the civilized world are counting on you and the TSA to be successful. The TSA does its job better than any similar organization on the face of the planet, and the entire world is following your lead. If the TSA fails, the world is going to fail." So I present to all of you on this Veterans Day, whether serving in the military or with the TSA, we are defending liberty and freedom. And because there is no greater mission on earth, there is no amount of pay commensurate with the services we provide. Part of our compensation must come from the fact that we are successful in our execution. We have been successful to date, and we must continue to be successful. The world is counting on us. In closing, in this Veterans Day speech, I did not talk about our nation's proud military history and provide a timeline of every major military conflict. I also did not talk about my personal military experience or read the biographies of some of our most famous and heroic military members. Someone can do that for you next year. Instead, I wanted to share some of the highlights of my awe-inspiring trip to the D-Day beaches of Normandy and draw some analogies between military service and service with the TSA. I truly believe the most common similarity is that we are the best on the planet at what we do, and the entire world is counting on us to be successful. We at the TSA are tasked with protecting our nation's transportation systems to ensure the freedom of movement for people and commerce. As a former Marine, I need to keep it more simple than that. I say all of us at the TSA exist for one reason, and that one reason is this: to keep bombs off airplanes. I know it's a tad more complex than that, but that's what it comes down to. And most of us in this room do so indirectly by providing leadership and support. Regardless of your individual role in keeping bombs off airplanes, I know you are as proud as I am of being a member of the world's finest transportation security organization. I know you are as honored as I am knowing the rest of the world is emulating the way we are doing business. I know we will continue to rise to the occasion, just as those who stormed the beaches of Normandy did 75 years ago. May God bless our current military members and keep them safe, and may He bless our veterans and all who selflessly serve others, including the hardworking men and women of the world's finest transportation security organization, the TSA. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cahill.
You're welcome.
As we continue to honor our Vietnam veterans through our partnership with the United States of America Vietnam War Commemoration Partnership Program, I ask our Vietnam veterans to please stand. Family members of Vietnam veterans, please stand. Thank you for your service and welcome home. For those veterans and family members who have not yet received the Vietnam Veterans Lapel Pin, I ask that you please come forward so we may present you with the partnership token of appreciation. All right, before we close today's ceremony, we would like to take this opportunity to pause to recognize FSD Cahill with a fellowship award presented on behalf of TSA Civil Rights.
Good morning to you. Thank you all for your service, those of you who are standing, those of you who have supported folks who have been in service. And I'm also wanting to express my sincerest appreciations for FSD Cahill. He is someone who actually walks the talk, and that's what this particular award is about. The Civil Rights and Liberties Ombudsman and Traveler Engagement Office, we engage with about 450 disability and multicultural organizations. They're community-based organizations and advocacy groups. We also handle roughly 3,000 passenger concerns a year. And against that backdrop, we rely very heavily on the leadership at the different airports as well as program offices here at TSA to help us to bridge those gaps, to be ambassadors, if you will. And we want to really share with you that FSD Cahill just is extraordinary. He did extraordinary work with us this year. We give out one fellowship award each year, and this one is going to Federal Security Director Cahill.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much.
Thank you, Deputy Administrator Cogswell, Mr. Cahill, and all veterans and all in attendance for participating in today's program. Our program will conclude with the retiring of the colors. Thank you again. Please stand for the retiring of the colors.
Up. Ready, face. Retreat, colors. Ready, up. Ready, face. Breathe in, up. Right shoulder, up. Ready, cut. Left, face.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our ceremony. Thank you again.